Did you know there's a verse in the Bible that most scholars agree should probably not be there? Yeah, I said it. A line that seems out of place, strangely timed, and even politically convenient. Sounds like a Netflix plot, huh? But this is real. And today we're talking about one of the most controversial and debated passages in all of Scripture, a verse that changed the game of how millions view their faith. Now, before you hit that skip button thinking this is just another "the Bible is fake" rant and stop. This is not about dismantling your beliefs and telling you something is wrong with what you believe. It's about recognizing the layers of material behind the text. It's about recognizing history, context, and the idea of ancient politics playing a part in what we read today. By the end of this video, you'll look at this verse and never read it the same way again. Ready to discuss what's not written between the lines? Let's go. Before we get started, I just want to ask you to subscribe to the channel. Click the button below and turn on the notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I post a new video. Let's take a look at John 5:4. Yes, that little verse that you probably didn't notice, or maybe you just skipped over it. Well, here's the kicker. If you simply open any modern-day Bible these days, that verse isn't in there. Poof, gone. Of course, older versions contain it. So, who decided to cut it out, and why? This tiny verse talks about angels stirring water, healing miracles, and a man waiting on water for years. That sounds poetical, right? Well, scholars scoff because it doesn't really fit with John's writing style. Even worse, it may have been added centuries later, likely to add support to a growing religious agenda. But think about it. How many of us grew up reading translations that either contained this little line or didn't, without having any clue whatsoever? And that's not just ancestral history. That's influence, power. I assure you this. Understanding of John opens a door to a deepening faith, not a lessening. So what's the origin of John 5:4? Let's back up a minute. The oldest, most trusted manuscripts, the Codex Sinaiticus or the Vaticanus, do not include that verse. But later copies include it, meaning it was added after the original text. Maybe it was a very well-meaning scribe. Maybe it was a church leader making a specific case. Also, the line about the angel stirring the water? It does seem to be contrary to John's writing style. John is much deeper than that. His gospel is more about theology and poetry than folklore or legend or even fiction, and this reads more like something slipped in from the oral tradition. So why keep it? Because it is a good story. It illustrates a very powerful image of healing and timing. But wait, if we take John 5:4 out of the story, does it lose its meaning? Actually, not really. The passage flows better without it. Jesus still heals the man. Jesus still challenges tradition, just less magical pool swimming. So maybe it was never a matter of truth. Maybe it was a matter of comfort. But who decides what stays and what goes? And in fact, if a single line can come in or go out, what else might have changed? Let's play detective for a moment. Why would someone enter John 5:4 in the first place? Perhaps the purpose was to clarify why the man was waiting there. Without that verse, his hope seems random. But with it, there is a reason, a system, a divine lottery. Now picture being a believer at the time. You are hearing story after story of healing. But how did Jesus determine this guy? The verse gives the answer. He had been waiting the longest. It was logical. It was fair. So perhaps the verse wasn't about accuracy. It was about making faith feel just a little more manageable. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Some early church leaders even disagreed about whether or not to include this line. Augustine, for example, cautioned against literal readings of such stories. He believed they detracted from reality or deeper truths. Likewise, some scribes kept copying it. They spread it to churches and regions. So we have a bifurcation, not of good and evil, but of tradition and clarity. One side wanted to preserve the familiar. The other side wanted to hone the message. And both were right in some way. Still, while it remains largely unassailable that some verses were added or removed, what does that say about how we read the Bible today? Now here's the part that makes some people uncomfortable. If John 5:4 was likely added later, what else is not original? And if the scribe is changing things or allowing things to stay based on what made sense at the time, can we say that every word has always been perfect and the same? Now, before you panic, I am not saying the Bible is fake or uninspired, nothing like that. But we should recognize that ancient faith communities were having real debates over what to include, how to understand it, and who was to make those important decisions. This was not just scholarly, it was power. And here is the kicker. This verse was not only debated in academic circles, it was part of church arguments about miracles, divine favor, and even salvation. These various communities of faith did not shape their theology based on scholarship, but were relying on the story to include all elements they could, the usage of magic pools. Others rejected it as an embarrassment of Jesus' real purpose. Why did modern translations omit it? Generally, scholars use older manuscripts for New Testament translations. But let's be real. Most people have no idea. They just read their Bible and trust what it says. There are no footnotes. There are no disclaimers. Just crickets where a story used to be. This isn't about losing faith. It's about growing it. Growing a faith that is strong enough to ask questions, to go deeper, and to understand that the truth does not undermine belief. It strengthens it. So what do we take away from this? One questionable verse does not break the Bible, but it does cause us to read differently, to ask not just what we believe, but why. And maybe that is the takeaway. If you enjoyed hearing this, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications because, spoiler, we'll be digging into more hidden Bible stories pretty soon. In comments, I'd love to hear what you think. Should verses like this stay or go? Faith does not mean neglecting the questions, it is about exploring the questions with courage. See you in the next one.